So I just ran a campaign using Indie Music Academy's Spotify playlisting service. It generated about 50,000 streams over a period of roughly 5 weeks. And in this video, I'm going to review the whole service. We're going to go through the data in pretty nitty-gritty detail for each playlist. We're going to look at the Spotify for Artists data from a streaming perspective, but also in listeners and stream rates, and then playlist ad rates. We're also going to talk a little bit about how the playlists look in terms of quality on the third-party service. And we'll talk a little bit about playlisting can fit into your music marketing strategy as a whole. So there's a lot of information to cover. But first, Indie Music Academy, if you don't know, it's owned by Ryan Voksek, who I've interviewed on this channel. And that's one of the only reasons I even tried this. I'm generally not a big fan of playlisting, which we'll talk a little bit more about later in this video, but it does have its place in an overall music marketing strategy. And the only reason I trusted to use his service is because I've talked to him a bunch of times. I know him, I know his products, and I trust that he would do something legit. So I hopped in a call with him, he explained to me how it works. He brought some other members from his team in that do the playlisting thing, and they did give me a free campaign to trial this out, and there is an affiliate link in the description. But aside from that, they did not pay me for this video, and they have literally no say over the contents of this video. So that's the transparency part. And I do have an interview video with Ryan if you want to just hear him chat about music marketing in general outside of this. He's a good dude. So this is essentially the campaign that was run. They have a very detailed sales page to walk you through exactly what to expect. Essentially, this campaign is the equivalent of their 50,000 guaranteed real streams campaign. It cost about $1,000. So it's not a cheap campaign by any means, but it guarantees 50,000 streams. And if you're wondering how they guarantee 50,000 streams, I wonder that too, because that you'll see when we look at the data, we got 51,588 streams. So when this campaign wrapped up, one of the first questions I had was, how were you able to get this so exact? And well, one, when we started the campaign, they asked me if they could have access to Spotify for Artists, and I actually said no. So they didn't have my Spotify for Artists data, but they usually will ask an artist if they can have viewer status so that they can track the campaign and make sure stream counts are being hit. But they said in absence of that, what they do is they actually have many Spotify for Artists data for artists in all these playlists that they're using. So they have a pretty awesome, accurate idea for like different spots in all these playlists, how many streams they generate per week, per month, per whatever. And usually they try to over deliver by a bit. And if they don't have Spotify for Artists, an artist complains and says, hey, we didn't get the stream count we were promised, then they'll add more on to make it right. So that's how they're able to guarantee the streams. Now, this song, I used my song Dreaming. And the reason why I did it is because I felt it would be a good fit for playlisting. Not all genres are always the best for playlisting because this is an EDM future-based track. It can fit on a lot of different playlists, and there's a lot of playlists for it on the market. So I chose this song. Also, I wasn't currently running ad campaigns on it. The stream count had kind of died over time. The algorithmic playlists have kind of dipped. And so it was a good one to be able to measure accurately. So they added me to 4 playlists to deliver this campaign. In particular, this song actually was put on editorial back in the day. Then you have Discover Weekly. But the playlist they added me to were this EDM Music 2023, this Electronica Vieja Exitos. I have no idea what that means. But it's some kind of electronic music playlist. There's Chill Step 2023, and then there is Best Beat Drops Ever. Those are the ones they specifically linked to me, and those are the ones that caused this, Spotify for Artists after loads, this duration of streams. And you'll notice here this is every single playlist ever. Not like whether it's an editorial, whether it's a third-party playlist, any kind of it's a playlist that's not algorithmic. You get on, you get a bunch of streams, then when you're off, you lose them essentially. You don't lose them, but you're not getting any new ones anymore. And this is a huge con about playlisting as a whole. I've talked about it before. We'll talk about it a little bit more later in the video. But this is a thing. This doesn't mean that the streams are fake. This doesn't mean anything other than you were on the playlist for this 5-week period and then you were taken off. So let's flip back here to the spreadsheet and let me walk you through how these numbers actually panned out. So what I did is I wrote down the follower count for each of these playlists. I also wrote down the amount of streams and the amount of listeners I got from these playlists. Then I calculated the amount of streams I got per person. So it ended up being 1.5, 1.2, 1.6, 1.2 per playlist. I could probably shave off some decimal points here. It's a little unnecessary. And then the listener to follower ratio. So this is just the amount of listeners divided by the followers calculated as a percentage. So, this playlist, they get 20% listeners per followers that they had. So that means even though this playlist has way more followers, it's way less engaged. And this playlist had way less followers, it's 4 times more engaged than this other playlist. Then I also wrote down my playlist spot. And this is actually, these two things are kind of related. This playlist I was added to slot 17. So it makes sense that the listens per follower would be higher, whereas this one I was added to 88. So it's not necessarily that this playlist is more engaged. I also was added to a much higher spot on the playlist. But then again, we could look at these two and say, okay, they're both about the same spot in the playlist, but this electronica one, I got about twice as many streams per follower from it. So therefore, this one's probably more engaged playlist than this playlist. There's other factors too, but it's just kind of a quick way to calculate relative engagement on the playlist. Now, in a vacuum, this data is somewhat meaningless, right? So what I did is I compared it to Bass Arcade, because as you saw here, this song was on Spotify's Bass Arcade playlist, which is a Spotify personalized editorial playlist. And it has 1 million followers or something, 960,000. So I was on this for about a month, a couple of years ago. And that playlist had 965,000 followers. At least at the time, I didn't write this down back when it got added, so I calculated all these stats right now. So the follower count might be a little skewed, but 965,000 followers. I get 45,000 streams, 32,000 listeners. I don't remember the playlist spot, but we had a 1.37 streams per listener and a 3.4 listeners per follower. So, you know, in terms of this number, the streams per listener, the Indie Music Academy playlists, and I calculated averages here across all of them. So the Indie Music Academy technically beat out Bass Arcade in terms of streams per listener, just by a little bit, but it is, you know, it's like 10%, or maybe a little less, but it's around 10%. Some of these playlists did a lot better, but some of them brought the average down quite a bit. Now, in terms of listeners per follower, the Indie Music Academy completely knocked it out of the park. So, you know, this is an 8.4 Indie Music Academy for listeners per follower, and Bass Arcade is a 3.4. I did, as I mentioned, enter this data late, so these followers probably were a little bit lower before, but it wasn't like dramatically different from this. So I'd say Indie Music Academy has about double the engagement of Bass Arcade, which is like the biggest EDM editorial, maybe not the biggest, but one of the big editorial playlists for EDM style music. Now, thanks to some new Spotify for Artists features where we can actually graph out on a song level different time frames. This used to be 28 days only. We can actually look at some countries and how they ran throughout the campaign. So I have 2023 here. You can obviously see this is that period of time, February 23rd or so to April 5th-ish or so, that the campaign ran. And we can see that the amount of streams came across a lot of countries. Like the United States definitely won with 623 streams, Brazil 434, Mexico, Netherlands, Canada, Germany, France. And so I just plotted some of these countries here. You can only plot 5 at a time, but we can see that, you know, every single country that I plotted here got a boost. So if we go here, 5, 4, 2, 2, 1 across all countries, then we go in the middle of the campaign, and it's way more across every country. The reason why that's good to look at, and I did look at this at several other countries as well. You don't want to get added to a playlist and have it just be for like one country. That's really sketchy. Now, technically, this stuff down here is last 28 days. So these you can't really see, but we can look at the graph up here to know that what the stream count is across a period of time, right? I wish we could do this for cities as well. That would be super helpful. And when you're running a campaign during the 28-day period, it would be good to look at this, just to make sure, because this is just last 28 days only. So this effectively shouldn't include anything from the period of time. See, I changed the time frame. It didn't change anything. So keep that in mind, that the city data is not here, but I didn't see anything that stood out. And what I would be looking for is to see if there's any like weird city, like, you know, this isn't during the campaign, but if we saw Helsinki, Finland or something show up as really high, or even some Midwestern United States city that has a population of 20,000 people and you're getting like 10,000 streams from that tiny town, that would be sketchy during the campaign. So we didn't see any of that. We see the country data is fairly spread across a bunch of different countries. It seems to be pretty US concentrated, but there's still plenty across other countries too. Now, if we flip over to the release level stats, we get extra data. So not only do we get streams, but we get listeners, streams per listener, saves, and playlist ads. And one thing that playlisting as a whole is notoriously bad at is the save rate. And you'll see there's pretty much no increase in saves during this campaign, and that is honestly super typical. Like maybe there's a little bit. We see here that it was more consistently high during this time frame than the time before and then the time after and all that. But it's still bad, right? Like it's nothing like this massive increase you see. That's because playlisting usually has a save rate of less than 5%. Like a 5% save rate in a playlist is actually like good. Sometimes you get like 10, but it's usually 5% or so. The playlist add rate, however, did go up. So people were adding it to a playlist, and I did calculate that in the spreadsheet. We get added to an additional 700 roughly playlists. I just kind of averaged 20 a day over 5 weeks, and that comes to about 700 playlist ads. Flipping back here, if we look at the streams per listener, it was averaging per day about 1.05 or so. And so it's pretty uniform throughout, which does make sense. We do have a little bit of ripples, but nothing compared to the organic ripples that we had before. So you see here, and it's a little hard to show, but the line is a lot more flat during this period than it is before and after. And that's just because all of a sudden you're getting a high amount of stream count across a bunch of different playlists, which are going to have a very not so good stream per listener rate. For like when we look here, we see they're all around one. They average out to 1.4 here. So it ends up being pretty uniform day by day. And usually when you're doing Facebook ads, it's like 2.5 to 3.5 kind of thing. Not per day, but like over like a 1 month period of time. And which is what this is, around a 1 month period of time. So the save rate is always going to be. Did that just update? That was kind of freaky. The save rate's always rough. The stream per listen rate's not always the best. The playlist ad rate can actually be somewhat decent, but that's typical of all playlisting. But I just wanted to show this data here for you so that you can have it and pause it and do any analysis you might want to run and see if interpret the data for yourself. Now, another thing on the note of quality, we look at the countries, we look at the engagement rates. We know engagement rate for playlisting is never good, but we did look at the countries and we see that the countries aren't just in one country, and for my knowledge, they weren't in one seat. I couldn't show that to you, though. But the engagement matches up with our playlisting. You wouldn't want to get on a playlist and see a 50% save rate because even the editorials don't give you that. So if you're getting a really good engagement rate from a playlist, it's probably fake. So I looked up these 4 playlists on Artist Tools. I do have a discount affiliate link in the description if you want to check out Artist Tools. It's way cheaper than Chartmetric. I did also look up these playlists in Chartmetric, and I didn't see any sketchy like dips or rises over time. They're all pretty much slow, fairly linear growth over time. So they look legit, and also we can just look at this kind of data here. Because right now Artist Tool seems to be down right now. But they have certain follower counts, 372 streams a day, 160, 154 a day. I think this is actually follower growth. It is follower growth here, but then over here it is roughly how many monthly listeners do these playlists have. So you can see that they're all fairly. Not only do they have a lot of followers, but they're fairly engaged as well. And they also mark them as high quality. And I've shown a video in the past, if you want to check it right here, how to spot fake stuff happening in playlists. And I did it with Artist Tools. So I gave you a few options if you wanted to vet playlists that you get added to from any service, not just any Music Academy, but anyone. If you want to vet the quality of them and make sure they're legit, and that way if they're not, you could contact the company and tell them to, 1, pull your music out of there, but 2, get you on a legit one. But yeah, Artist Tools is an option, and everything checks out here as well. Flipping back to our master spreadsheet here, we can do a couple little bits of math, taking into account that the playlist would have cost $1,050 to get all this. We got 51,000 streams, and then we know it cost $1,050 by the way. That leads to a cost per stream of almost exactly 2 cents per stream. And this playlist volume generated about $180-ish in revenue. So, if you were to subtract that out, then this comes to like $850 is what it actually cost. And then the rest was what you actually paid. So it's a little bit less once you factor that in. Now, there was actually some pre and post stream change. So if we flip back here, here, go to streams. I did a little bit of math using the custom slider. Figured out that on average before we were getting around 50 streams a day or so. And then afterwards did some averages. We're getting about 100 streams per day. And not super scientific. You can see there's days that are like 250, and I just kind of picked a week after and averaged out a couple weeks before. So 50 to 100 streams per day. and that I wrote here. So you could do the math on what an extra 50 streams a day is, multiplied by however many months you want to calculate. And those streams would also technically be caused by this campaign. Like, I would count those if I run a Facebook ad campaign, because often Facebook ads, most of the streams you get on a Facebook ad campaign happen way after the campaign is over. Like, you'll still be getting streams a year down the line as a result of that campaign, a year after it was over. So it's the same with playlisting. Obviously, the vast majority of the playlisting does happen during the campaign, but there is obviously some type of ripple here, right? We did get a daily stream increase, which is, again, a good sign that the playlists are all legit, in addition to all the extra data that we've already considered thus far. So now we need to talk about when you should actually use playlisting. And I'll first mention that there is a link in the description if you want to go try Indie Music Academy Spotify playlist service. It is an affiliate link, just in full disclosure. But let's talk about when Spotify playlisting actually makes sense. Where I don't think it makes sense. I don't think if you have $1,050 that you should go buy a $1,050 Spotify playlisting campaign, no matter who it's from. And the reason is what we've seen in the data, that you get a bump in streams for 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever the duration is, and then you go down to pretty much back to where you started. And you don't gain that many saves. You do gain some playlist ads, but you're pretty much going to gain no additional followers either. So it's good for getting you a temporary boost in streams, and that's really it. That's the niche that Spotify playlists fit in. And what I don't like seeing is when people get all their budget for marketing thrown in playlisting because it's easy. That's not really what it's designed for. And there's people that do that, and maybe they have good reasons for it. But in my opinion, what you should be using Spotify playlists for is once you're running your ad campaign and you're getting on algorithmic playlists, then maybe start dropping in a little bit of playlisting, but don't make it a big part of your budget if you do it at all. So for example, let's say you have a fairly sizable budget to market your song. You're spending $2,000, for example, which is a nice budget. A lot of people spend $500 to $1,000. But if you have a $2,000 budget, maybe you're pushing your song with your ads and you start getting on Release Radar and then getting on Discover Weekly. Now Spotify has figured out who likes your song and who doesn't, because they're recommending it algorithmically. So they understand who your song is for. You have a lot of really high engagement from your ads. Now you can drop on a little bit of Spotify playlisting to get around 10% of your streams from playlisting, just to give yourself a temporary boost in streams to show heightened activity to hopefully push even more algorithmic playlisting. But the vast majority of everything is now happening from recurring listeners and from algorithmic playlists. So the engagement rate happens at a really high rate. If you drop the playlisting from day one when your song comes out, now your save rate and your playlist ad rates and your interaction rates are all incredibly lowered by this really high volume playlisting campaign. And it's really hard for your Facebook ads to compensate for that. And I've seen people get 50,000 streams from playlisting alone and get nothing in Discover Weekly. But very often people get around 10,000 streams, they start seeing Discover Weekly. And that's because of those save rates, those repeat listen rates, those playlist ad rates, those follow rates, those listening to other music in your catalog rates. And playlisting just doesn't do that. So it seems my firm belief right now, from all the data I've seen and from talking to Ryan and his team, is that Indie Music Academy is a safe Spotify playlisting service to use. And if you're looking for Spotify playlisting and it fits in your strategy, I would say Indie Music Academy is a great option. If you want to see a comparison, I'll make a little playlist right here. There's only 2 right now. There's Indie Music Academy and Moonstrive, but I've reviewed both of those, and there is going to be another one coming, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see more. And if you want to learn about how you can use Facebook ads to promote your music with, as I just mentioned before, has a lot of benefits, check out my other playlist right here where you can learn a ton more about that as well. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you next video. Bye.